Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. So, back-to-back victories to talk about. That's a positive, but it's Tottenham Hotspur, so there's always some weird, strange stuff that happens as well. I did covered two matches yesterday. Won the under-19s at Hotspur Way in UEFA Youth League, and then later went on to the first team game. Both games had elements where Spurs were completely in control, and then elements where Spurs were completely out of control. I guess it wouldn't be Tottenham Hotspur unless there's something to talk about that isn't quite normal. But that's Tottenham Hotspur for you. I'll talk about the under-19s game briefly later on, but let's get to the cut to the chase and the first team. Obviously, before the game, straight into the really nice tribute. I felt it was minutes applause for both John Duncan, former Spurs player, of course, who sadly died recently, and Gian-Piero Ventroni, of course, the fitness coach, very popular fitness coach, who also suddenly passed away last week. Minutes applause was so noisy. It was fantastic. Italian flags I noticed in the south stand. May have been others. Sorry, I just happened to be looking at the south stand. And also some flags actually with Gian-Piero's name and an image on them as well. What I thought was really nice as well that Spurs did, on his normal seat in the dugout, they put a really nice bouquet of flowers, his coat, his whistle, his stopwatch, as if to say, like, he's there tonight still in spirit. And the Frankfurt captain as well laid a wreath in front of the seat as well. I just thought it was incredibly classy. Showed loads of respect, and that's the thing, isn't it? Both John Duncan and Gian-Piero Ventroni, both people that deserved a lot of respect for what they achieved in their different fields, and yeah, I thought that was a really classy start to the game. It was, and pre-match as well. But as for the match itself, like I say, a very mixed match, and the Antonio Conte that we got in the press conference, deep within the bowels of Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, was not really the Antonio Conte I was expecting to have at one point in the game. Because, Spurs were cruising at one point. 3-1 against 10 men, it kind of felt this could be even better than this. It could be an even better scoreline. But it wasn't. Spurs kind of let it slip and slide towards the end. And there was some couple of nervy moments. But they got there in the end. And, despite the fact that Spurs obviously had won 3-2 in a game, they really did have to win. And they're now in the driving seat, top of the group. Only have to win the game against Sporting at home to ensure that they go through because of the way it works with the teams below them. So you'd think with that, you'd still think, okay, it was a bit rubbish, we'll work on it, but, it was some good stuff, blah, blah, blah. Conte wasn't. He was actually quite miffed, and he had quite a hoarse voice as well because he'd been shouting so much in those final minutes that, yeah, his voice was pretty much on its way out. Be intrigued to know what it's like this morning. He was quite frustrated, and he explained that his voice was just battered by those last 15 minutes. He's yelling at the players, essentially coaching them constantly from the sidelines rather than just letting them do what they meant to do, because he'd made so many changes, all 5 changes, and yeah, the team was a little bit in disarray. And it's really awkward because, as fans and journalists, we're saying, like, oh, bring blah, blah on. Bring player X, Y, Z on because, they need some minutes. But then we see lots of players come on and we're a bit like, oh, why'd you make that many changes? It's a can't-win scenario, I guess. And yeah, I started the press conference and just asked him, essentially, like, that was so good in one bit, but so bad as well towards the end. It's like, how do you analyse a performance like that? And he pretty much admitted to me that he, the players, and even the fans had kind of made a mistake in thinking that the game was done. He was quite honest about his own part in that as well. He said, it's difficult to start from the end of this game because we played a really good game, despite conceding a goal, one that we could have been much better with in that situation. But our reaction was an important reaction. We created many chances to score. We scored 3 times, and Trapp was their best player in the whole game. This is the positive aspect from the game. The negative aspect is the final part, and it has to be a big lesson for everybody. For me, for the players, the game finishes when the referee whistles 3 times. In the last part of the game, everybody conceded the game ended, and for this reason we made a big mistake. We conceded a corner and they scored. And then we had the opportunity to score a penalty, but we missed the penalty. When we missed the penalty, honestly, I was a bit scared because I thought everything can happen. We're talking about a really good performance, but the final part, we have to take a big lesson. Everybody, myself and the players, everybody conceded the game had ended. Maybe also in the stadium and the fans. It was an important win for us. Now we're leading the group. Everything is in our hands, and we do have the chance for the next game with a win to go through to the next round. So I asked him, essentially, okay, you've admitted this. I got a follow-up question, which was nice. We don't often get those after matches. But I asked him, you've conceded you were at fault as well. So if you could go back, what would you have done differently? And I don't know if he was expecting that. There's a part of me that wonders whether he's thinking, well, I didn't do anything really wrong. It was the players, they messed up. But I'm going to put myself in there just to, make it sound fairer. And so I asked him what he would do differently. A little bit like, ooh. And then he said, what did he say? It's very difficult to explain. For sure, the lesson has to be that no one has to concede the game. And also, if you're leading 3-1, you're playing against 10 men and everything seems on the right path. But you must understand football is difficult. It is difficult. Now we're talking with a smile because we won. But imagine if this game finished a draw. That would have been disaster. It would have been. It would have. Against 10 men, it would have been absolutely ridiculous. But they held on just about. I was trying to think. I don't think Lloris, after their headed second goal, really had much to do. He had one low, comfortable save. It wasn't too bad. Before that, though, he'd made some crackers, actually. Flying save from Lindstrom, which was superb, with that classic kind of wrong hand save. That was such a good one. What was the other one? It was a low down one, I think, from Lindstrom as well. But he played well. And actually, Hugo Lloris was quite interesting after the game. He said in the mix zone that essentially it was a lack of effort in the second half. Spurs really took the foot off the pedal and didn't feel they needed to do as much. And that was what came back to bite them. I think I've got his quotes here as well. There you go. At the end, you just remember the score, the wins. But on our side, we have to analyse performances and always try to improve individually and collectively. Because he was asked whether the current squad can handle the ups and downs better because it's a bigger squad. He said, I don't want to compare with the past. I believe today we should have been more able to control the game in the second half because when you have ambition, the field talks by itself. Today in the second half, at some point, we started to do a little bit less effort. Excuse me, a little bit less effort. Obviously, there were a lot of changes, but it's part of the game and a good opportunity for the players who came on. We work so hard every day that you can understand that we can be frustrated after a game like this one because we should have managed the game better. But I'm not unhappy. I'm happy with the 3 points. That's the most important thing. And we had a great reaction after the goal conceded. But it's just this feeling with ups and downs. I don't like this. When you want to be a top team, you have to be able to control games like this one better. And he's right. It is. That's still the problem with Spurs at the moment. Is during games they have ups and downs. Last night there were some moments when the football was lovely. Really free-flowing football. They were ripping them apart. It could have been 5 or 6 goals maybe. But there's other parts when they just almost like retreat into a shell. And to do that against 10 men was just bizarre. If anything, those Frankfurt players were having to push on. And every time they did, Spurs should have picked them off. Absolutely picked them off. That's one of their strengths. But they didn't. They kind of sat back and it became nervy. And we were sitting there in the press box and just thinking, why are Spurs looking nervous against 10 men? It was like a really weird kind of way the game had gone. And actually, in the nice theme of things being a bit weird, there was suddenly a really strong smell of like TCP in the press area, in the press box up in the stadium. For those who don't know what TCP, or maybe it's called something different in other countries, essentially, when I was young at school, many, many years ago, if, let's say, I was playing football in the playground, fell over and cut my knee, the nurse in the school would put like TCP on it. It's got this really kind of strong chemical smell. It's like antiseptic type thing to stop it getting an infection. So you really smelt that smell. And then it started to kind of give way to like a burning electrical smell. And one of the kind of stewards in the press area was quite eagle-eyed, actually. He worked out what it was. So I don't know if you remember, Christian Romero was sliding into, I think he was ushering a ball out of play. And as he was doing so, he kind of was pushed, slightly slipped down that little slope they have at the edge of the pitch. And he crashed into this advertising hoarding. It was really sore looking. He got his arm out, so I think his elbow took the brunt of it. But when he kind of got up and walked away, we noticed that little section of the advertising hoarding had gone black. It wasn't working anymore. And then this steward noticed it was smoke coming out of it. Christian Romero had actually broken the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. There was smoke coming out of it. That was what we could smell. It was like a weird smell to begin with. Thankfully, it stopped, because otherwise, it's right behind Hugo Lloris's goal. That could have caused a bit of a problem there. But thankfully, it went out. But yeah, that was why we had this weird smell. So if any of you were sitting in the North Stand or over in the West Stand with us, you would have probably smelt that smell and wondered what it was. And that was what it was. Christian Romero broke the stadium. I don't know whether Daniel Levy and the club will take it out of his next salary packet. They'll replace their advertising hoarding or not, which would be very harsh. But I always remember was it Dinamo Zagreb president when they were doing the Luka Modric deal when he joined Spurs, and they'd asked for a couple of shirts or something. This was what he claimed. They'd asked for a couple of shirts from Spurs, they just wanted some Spurs shirts. And when they got the bill essentially to pay, when they got Spurs, I guess I don't know how you describe it really, the statement of the accounts of the transfer of money for Luka Modric, in it, the president claimed it was Daniel Levy, had deducted 4 shirts, the price of 4 Tottenham shirts, off of Luka Modric's transfer fee, which is so mad. But, that's I don't know whether that happens at every club or whether that's just Tottenham. But yeah, Christian Romero, look out for your next payslip, because there might be an advertising hoarding cost taken out of it. But yeah, I just love the fact that Romero just kind of got up, just a little bit dazed, shook himself off, rubbed his elbow down. But yeah, he had destroyed a really probably expensive bit of stadium equipment. But yeah, so there you go. The match itself, it kind of showed both ends of the quality spectrum. I'll always say this, that when Sonny or Harry Kane are on form, either of them, Spurs invariably will win the match. If you've got both of them on form, you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to win the game. It's very rare that the two of them are firing on all cylinders and Spurs lose the game, because they can pretty much outscore the opposition. They just kind of, when that link-up is going, it is telepathic. As Sonny said after the game, because this was their 50th goal combination as well as a pairing. That is ridiculous. That's, setting each other up to score. Sonny said, "We just understand each other really well. I know what he likes to do, and he's the same with me. The relationship, it's always hard work and good effort. It's always been a payoff for hard work. Many more to come, I hope." Sonny was brilliant. Sonny was unplayable at parts of the night. Obviously, named man of the match by UEFA as well. He was so good. I felt sorry almost for Frankfurt defender Tuta, because I can just imagine him waking up in the middle of last night, like in a cold sweat, kind of just having nightmares about having faced Sonny, because, it did really happen, kind of thing. Because the amount of times he just flew down that left-hand side. When Sonny has got his confidence behind him, he absolutely flies with that ball. That's why it's so strange when you watch him and he has like a heavy first touch and he gives it away. Because when he is on his game, it's so difficult to stop him. He's got an extra yard of pace in his feet as well. He's just, last night was one of those nights where he was superb. And yeah, poor old Tuta. He didn't have a hope in hell, really, of stopping him. And what did he get? It was within 3 minutes, his 2 yellow cards. One for a tackle where he just was so late to trying to stop him getting through. And the second one, he was pretty much trying to swap shirts with him during the game. And there was some kind of confusion over it to begin with. I think there was maybe a suggestion that it was an offside which would have ruled out the second yellow, which was already being brandished. But A, I don't think it was an offside anyway. And B, it didn't stop Richarlison getting a yellow card, did it, after he scored that goal that was ruled out? So I don't really understand the logic behind that. But anyway, he went off. His first goal was really nice. It was one of those where in the past, maybe when Sonny's had time to think about something when he's running through, you maybe slightly worry that he might score. But when he's firing, they're the kind of goals that they just fly in. And he did. It was lovely. I think it was good work from Richarlison, if I remember correctly. He got the ball across to Kane. He kind of took it into his kind of feet as he was... I think he just had to reach a little bit for it, but he turned so quickly, played one of those trademark through balls to Son. That's when he's like in quarterback mode, when he just sees his wide receivers flying on and he just pings the ball through. And it was such a nice ball, perfectly into his path. He runs on And like I say, Sonny maybe could have had a dip in confidence between, because obviously he hadn't scored in the 2 games after the Leicester hat-trick, but he was absolutely flying. He did. He just went through, right foot, wasn't it, into the bottom corner. Really nice finish. Nothing Trapp could do about it. He had a claim for a penalty himself as well, which is a tough one. I wouldn't say it was quite as stonewall as the Kane one, but he had a shout. He did have a shout. I think it's one of those where maybe it looks slightly more shoulder to shoulder. It was a difficult one, that one. It could have been given. In any other time, it might have been given. But then, to be honest, even Kane's one, I couldn't get my head around the fact that the referee, whose name was Carlos de Serra Grande, because Kane was going mad. He was like, "It's a penalty." It was a really nice little mazy dribble, and he was just kind of hacked down as he went into the box. And the referee was just like, no. And you could just tell VAR was probably in his ear going, yeah, Carlos, you probably should have a little look at that. You've made a grande mistake there. I'm sure they didn't actually say that. Because he immediately went over to his pitch side monitor. Honestly, he wasn't there that long, and he came back and went, yeah, penalty. And Harry Kane did power that one home, but goal of the night, Sonny's second goal. What a goal. The very underrated Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. I will continue to back him, despite those who decide that he's not good enough, which I still can't. Honestly, I'd say he's been Spurs player of the season so far. I'm putting it out there. I think he has. I think in terms of the consistency of his performances, I do. What's he got now? Three assists, 2 goals in his 13 games. So he's provided goal contributions almost half the total of his games, and he's a central midfielder that isn't really known for that. I think it's superb. I think it was a real leader last night as well again. And when he went off, it started to get really nervy. I don't think there's any, him and Benson Kerr actually, when they both went off. But yeah, this moment of beautiful football gets down the right, shows how you're curling a beautiful dinked kind of cross from the right hand side, and Sonny had just pulled back, just kind of away from the defenders. Oh my goodness, the technique to catch that ball with his left foot was beautiful. It was just one of those volleys that, I do wonder whether it'll end up being the goal of the round, as it were. So maybe one to keep an eye out for as well. He actually described it afterwards. He said, I think he told BT Sport this, when the ball came to me, Pierre saw me before he crossed it. The ball was just really clear to me, and there was only one option to take the volley. I hit it really clean. I was very happy. It was brilliant. Brilliant. One of those where you make that face, don't you? You kind of watch it back on the replay and go, ooh. It was just superb. What was quite interesting after the game, in a way, was that Conte was two things. He was so frustrated with the way the game ended, and also I think he was trying to protect Kane a little bit as well, because there was questions about the second penalty, which went straight into the south stand, and he didn't really praise Sonny too much, and he had a few chances to do so. In the press conference, he was asked a couple of times about, especially that second goal as well. I think Spurs TV or Spurs Play nowadays it's called, they asked him about it. And I feel like maybe in the BT interview, I can't remember. But yeah, he kind of used it to have a bit, kind of press home the point that, look, those wonderful moments could have been cancelled out by the silly performance at the end of the game. And I get it. He's desperately trying to stamp the fact on this that, yeah, that was all great. You've got to learn from what happened. And I think that's, I suppose, the measure of a coach. And I think what's got to be remembered is Conte loves Sonny. Conte has constantly said Sonny is absolutely world-class, one of the best players that he's worked with. That's not in doubt. It's not like he was snubbing Sonny or anything. And I think maybe he just felt like this was one of those nights where he didn't need to keep saying it. Because don't forget, during those kind of times when Sonny was having a little bit, by his own admission, was having a bit of a tougher time early in the season, Conte was there every week, doing kind of what he did with Kane yesterday, constantly saying, what are you worrying about? Sonny's class, kind of thing, and constantly having his back. And maybe that's the consistency that he doesn't now need to say that he's incredible. Maybe it's just a platitude. But I just think that was interesting. Have a little look back. Look at the transcripts I put out. Look at the various interviews. Every time he's asked about Sonny and the King, it's like, no, I'm going to use this as a lesson. Don't let that be cancelled out, that brilliant moment. And yeah, Sonny was off the pitch, wasn't he, as well, during those kind of final moments. Lucas Moura came on for him back in it, because it was quite interesting at the press. Because we saw open training on Tuesday morning before the press conference, and we saw like Kulusevski out there and Lucas and Tanganga. They're all back in there. But yeah, we had a little bit of a curveball that Kulusevski wasn't actually ready yet, and had only taken part in that first little bit of the part of training. Words are stumbling. It's late in the day. I apologise. But yeah, even Luke, those final minutes for Sonny were difficult. He was saying the last 5 minutes were really tough. In the Champions League, you never know what will happen. It was uncomfortable sitting on the bench and watching. The most important thing was the 3 points. It was a really important win. Positive things, but always room for improvement. We have to improve because we have a massive game at the weekend. There's still 2 games to play in this group, and we have to go again. 2 tough games. We need to prepare more than the other teams. So yeah, Sonny was superb. Absolutely brilliant. Kane, I thought if he hadn't blazed that penalty over that, I think he would have been right up there in terms of performance as well. It was so rare for him to blast it over. And the irony is he's actually missed 2 of his last 4. And I think, I've written it down here as well. Where was it? I've got the number here. He'd scored 21 successive spot kicks for Spurs before this last little 4, where he's missed 2 of them. It was a poor one by his own kind of admission. I thought the first one, the goalkeeper guessed the right way. I don't know whether he was almost going to get it or not, but he certainly was getting near it. And obviously the fantastic one he took for England, didn't he? But yeah, this one was very un-Kane-like. It was a bit wild. It was right up there in the south stand. But other than that, I actually felt he was really disciplined. And it turned out afterwards that he'd had a specific game plan that Conte had asked him to kind of adhere to. And it all came from Conte watching back the first game and seeing where if Kane took up a specific role and didn't deviate too much from this position in the pitch, it would actually naturally draw the Frankfurt defenders towards him and create space for Sonny and Richarlison, which obviously worked. We saw the goals work. So Conte's quotes on that. I think that for us it was really, really important the first leg that we played against Eintracht Frankfurt. In that game we could win, but we didn't exploit many important situations. In this game we had 2 days to work and to prepare situations to hurt them, and I think the position of Harry was really, really important. Today I asked him to stay in a specific position. In my opinion, he played in a really fantastic way and he made our system. He scored, and he could have scored the second penalty. The combination was good between him and Sonny, and Richie was also good with the strikers. And he also said, Conte gave him that little, like I say, defending that second penalty, he essentially said he might have just been knackered. He said, we're talking about a player that is very, finds it, that is English. I'll read it exactly how he said it. We're talking about a player that is very difficult to miss penalties. He's a killer, and I think that also today in the end he was really, really tired because he ran a lot. He played for the team, and I think he played in a fantastic way today. Harry scored, and this is good news for us. Also, Sonny got 2 goals, and now I repeat, this game has ended. Good win, but we're leading our group, and now we need to be focused on the Premier League because we have a tough game against Everton at home, 3 tough games before Sporting Lisbon, home against Everton, away against Manchester United, and then against Newcastle. And interestingly, after the game, he kind of gave a little bit of some mixed news about fitness. And this was only in his interview with BT Sport. He said, Richarlison had a good game. He had a problem with his knee. I hope it's nothing serious for Saturday's game with Everton. We should have Kulusevski for that game. He's an important option for us. He's vital. Which was interesting because in the press conference, he said completely opposite. Not completely opposite. He said that everyone was available, pretty much, for the game against Everton. So I don't know. That means one of 2 things. Either he forgot about Richarlison, or in the intervening time between his BT Sport interview and coming into the press conference, which would have been about 20 minutes, someone maybe just came up to him and said, no, Richie's fine. It could be either way. We'll find out tomorrow. There's a press conference again tomorrow. Literally feel like I'm living my life beside Antonio Conte at the moment. Or in front of him, I guess. He's probably sick of seeing this face. We've got a press conference. We have 4 press conferences a week at the moment. post-match and pre-match. So yeah, he's getting to hear my dopey voice quite a lot. So yeah, I don't know exactly what will happen with Richarlison, but we will find out. There was another attacker who on the day, I thought he did really well, and that was the lesser spotted Bryan Gil. So, you know, we spoke about Bryan Gil with his performance in Germany in the first game against Frankfurt, where he kind of proved a lot of the things that Conte had said about him back in February, that, you know, physically he's not really strong enough at this level and things like that. Or not this level, sorry, for English football. And I guess German football is a similar kind of physical, fast-paced game. Which is, yeah, it was probably fair. But you know what? Fast forward a week or so, he had about 10 minutes or so from the bench, including the added time. I think he did really well. He was like a man on a mission. He ran, he battled, he kind of launched himself into stuff. He tried to track back to get the ball. There was one moment we thought it was going to go the other way because I think it was Kane sent him away down the right. And he just, like the ball kind of got stuck under his feet. He almost tripped over it. And we're like, oh no, Brian, that was not what you needed right now. But then it was almost like fate kind of played a different game with Bryan Gil yesterday. It gave him one moment that was really nice and one moment that wasn't so. So the moment that was really nice was after losing that ball, one of the Frankfurt defenders, I can't remember who it was, just backheeled it straight to him. And there was no real reason to it. And then he took the ball on. He did really well. It was kind of really mazy, in and out, weaving dribble. A bit like Kane's one for his penalty. And the defender, it was so annoying because I think had he done what he was doing and then gone in and scored a goal, it would have been an incredible goal. It would have been an absolute kind of Champions League goal that really would have stuck to his name for forever, really. But as it was, the defender just put his leg out behind him and went, no, mate, you're not going through, and brought him down. It was a stonewall penalty. And that's the one, obviously, Harry Kane sent into the stratosphere. So that was kind of Bryan Gil's kind fate moment with the back heel. Unfortunately, it went the other way a little bit later because Harry Kane got down the left, and despite being knackered, you know, showed a bit of pace, got down the left-hand side, and Bryan Gil's in the middle, in the box, going like, you know, you can see him go, oh, Harry. It was so... I'm playing it back in my mind. I just feel so sorry for him because, you know, this is not to be kind of rude or disrespectful, but I think he was the smallest player on the pitch, Bryan Gil, at that point. And Harry Kane put in a cross from the side of the box that would have been perfectly fine for any other teammate probably on his team, apart from the diminutive dribbler that is Bryan Gil. Oh, I just felt so sorry for him. If he'd played it across the floor, he would have put it in the goal. If he'd played it any other height below his fringe, it would have gone in the goal. But instead, he just played it a little bit higher. And you saw like Bryan Gil like leaping with everything he'd got. And it kind of just slightly blew that brilliant Beatles-style mop that's on top of his head. I felt so sorry for him because it was another big moment. But yeah, wasn't to be. Floated over his head. But you know what? It was good. It was good from Bryan Gil. He showed that he can offer something. It was exciting to watch. The fans really got into it, bought into it. They loved it in the stadium. They really he whipped them up. He was the best thing about those final moments, really. My only worry is that bright cameo has maybe come when it's too late. Because what timing to do something like that, but then Kulusevski and Lucas Moura are now back and fit. And I just feel that for everything good that he's done, Conte looks at that bench, and let's say they play with a 3-5-2 against Everton. He looks at that bench, and he's got Richarlison, Kulusevski, Lucas. Bryan Gil might not even get on the bench, let alone get on the pitch. I do feel really kind of... do feel sorry for him. I do. You know, maybe you could argue should have maybe made a bit more of an impact in Germany when he got the chance. I don't know if you're going to be really harsh on him. But yeah, timing-wise, it has not really worked out for him. He was a nuisance, though. And I think he's proved, you know, I talk about Conte's circle of trust and the players that are in it. I think, you know, Bryan Gil is now, he's brought himself up. He's holding on by his fingertips. He is kind of holding on to that circle of trust. He's just not quite in it. And it's just about building that trust with Conte now. You know, if Conte's a fair man, he might decide, and I'm sure he is, he might, against Everton at some point in the game, look at the bench and think, oh, do you know what? Brian Hill's deserved another chance. Let's get him on there. Apologies for this phlegm sounding when I'm saying Brian Hill, but I'm told that's how you pronounce it. And you know how great I am with pronunciations. And yeah, he may look at Brian Hill and decide, oh, do you know what? He did really well there. He set up a penalty or won a penalty, and he could have had another goal if Harry Kane had just played him a decently heighted ball. And maybe he does bring him on, and then that's his chance to do it again. And I think he's got the fans. I think the fans haven't written him off yet at all. So if he puts in another couple of performances, the fans will start calling for him. And, you know, that plays his part. Conte isn't massively swayed by the fans, but I think if there's a swell of public opinion about something, you'd think he'll take note. Although, yeah, maybe not so when we look at right wing back, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Yeah, but no, I thought it was really good for Brian Hill. And at the worst, he's just proving again on a big stage in the Champions League, albeit in a very stretched and open game. I should stress that. I do think that's when he can make a big impact for Spurs, is coming on when games are stretched like that. But he's done it on a Champions League stage, and at the worst in January, that loan door might open for him to head off, whether it's back to Valencia or elsewhere. So yeah, the other end of the pitch. That's where I felt Spurs were a little bit less impressive. Like I said, I thought Lloris was good. I thought Lloris, after a couple of slightly mixed performances, I thought he played well. Romero was okay. I do think he's getting back somewhere to the Romero we know, which is good, other than breaking advertising hoardings. Eric Dyer had an iffy start to the game. I think he got booked for a kind of stopping someone running through, although you could argue he was taking one for the team in that respect. But then he had a mare with the first, with the goal, the first goal, and it was Romero. I was trying to remember who played it past. It was Romero. Just played a straightforward pass across the box to him, and Dyer just had an awful touch and just kind of let it kind of roll under his feet, or even just got a touch on it and just kind of bounced off him. And that then set this little chain of events where the ball was put back in. Lloris made quite a brave attempt to get the ball. He got a touch to it, but then it came out. And it was not back to Kamada, who was completely clear to very gratefully accept the gift. What I would say about Dyer, I did think he recovered after that quite well. He played some really nice balls over the top to start attacks. And he was pretty much secure after that in defence. And again, he was finally got 12 whole minutes of rest, maybe 17 if you include added time, because he came off in the 78th minute for Sanchez. Again, though, the defence looked shaky when he went off. It's so difficult because these players need rest, but the people coming in, they're not used to playing together. And we're going to talk a lot more about that later on when I talk about the midfield. But yeah, it made a difference as soon as he came off. And I think you could feel that as well, where they look shakier without Dyer in the backline. You know, I saw the brief look I had at social media afterwards. I saw people moaning about Lloris and Dyer after the game, among others. And I thought that was interesting that they were, yeah, Dyer made a mistake. Of course he did. But I actually felt that, like I say, they missed him when he went off. And I felt that Lloris actually had a good game. So I didn't really get why they were getting it. But, you know, social media doesn't always make the most sense. And yeah, the left-hand side, that looks to be where Conte is most comfortable with his, rotation. Longley or Davies, it seems to be one or the other, and he's happy enough with both. So that's kind of how the whole squad should be, but that's certainly an area where he's happy enough. I feel like he's a bit like that with left wing back as well. I think he, like I've said this a million times, he really likes Ryan Sessegnon, thinks he's got a big future ahead of him. And, you know, his performance against Brighton was very good, and he earned himself back-to-back starts. And I thought he played well. He got right up and down that left-hand side, got another 90 minutes under his belt, which is really good for his confidence as well and his fitness. He could have had a goal himself. I think it was Richarlison battled past the player, got the ball across. And the only thing I'd say, I'd wanted Sessegnon to really push himself and slide in there to get the ball. Because what actually happened was the defender got back, made a tackle, and that tackle kind of knocked the ball against Sessegnon, and then the keeper saved that as the ball ricocheted off him. Whereas I think if Sessegnon had just put himself in there, got to the ball first, I think he just probably would have put it past the keeper. But he might have taken a whack, but still, Yeah, I'd like to see that. That's just part of the game for him. It's just to kind of continue to improve as a wing back. But no, he was dangerous, putting quite a few kind of balls into the box. And I like the way he links up with Kane and Son, both of them. I think, especially with Sonny down that left, but also with Kane. I always notice that when Kane looks up, I think his first thought is to go down that left-hand side because he can see Sessegnon's making a really good run and the movement that they need there. Which, of course, lends you to think, why is he not looking at the right? And that's because, obviously, Emerson Royale was there. I hate talking about Emerson Royale when he's had a particularly a game that he didn't do particularly well in, and it kind of just ticks every box of the things that people are kind of criticise. Look, I will always state this about Emerson Royale. It's not really his fault. He is a fullback trying to be turned into a wing-back, and he does not fit. It is a square peg going into a circular hole. It doesn't really work. It will work in some games when you need a more defensive fullback type, but in those moments, like I say, when Harry Kane is looking up to who to ping the ball to, he's going to go left. Remember my blocked drain or blocked pipe analogy. That right-hand pipe is blocked, so your water is shooting down the left. So, such a weird analogy. Oh, simile? I think I said like, so technically it becomes a simile. Yeah, and the trouble with Emerson yesterday was that while he did have a couple of good tackles in the box, I thought, the Spurs box, defensively he let himself down because Alidou jumped above him for the second goal. It was kind of his man. And yeah, so he got kind of taken out then. But going forward, it was just the same old story. There was one moment, it was so bad, I just knew what was going to come from him next. Who was it? I think it was Kane. Kane swept the ball out wide to him, and everyone kind of ran on because it was a really quick. I think Kane had surged across the halfway line, and everyone else was racing. One of those classic Spurs counter-attacks. And the ball was played to Emerson this time, and he just couldn't control it. It kind of bounced across, and he almost like knocked the ball behind him in miscontrolling it. And then that obviously gave Frankfurt players time to get back. And then he brought the ball forward and he just passed it straight to one of their players when he was trying to play a through ball to someone. I can't remember who it was. Yeah, it just... I don't want to. I just don't want to jump in on a pile-on. He's just not at the moment the right fit for that role, and I think it's laudable. I can't remember what the word is now. For Conte to continue to kind of have his back, and I think that's important for managers and players. But I just think it must be clear to Conte that the system relies on those wing backs, and it's not quite working on that right hand side. He's suspended again, obviously, for the weekend. Matt Doherty, you'd think, especially as he didn't give him any minutes last night, Matt Doherty will come in and start again after, a bit rusty, but on the whole, more positive, I felt, going forward against Brighton. And then he made that brilliant tackle towards the end to essentially stop Trossard, I think it was, making it 1-1. And I think unless the only maybe reason that he doesn't play there is if he decides Sessignon can play a third game in a week and plays Perisic on the right, because Perisic didn't come on at all either last night. I'd imagine with Sessignon, he'll be told, look, just because of your hamstring issues in the past, probably playing 3 games in 7 days, having played 90 minutes in the first 2, maybe isn't the best idea. Perhaps that's what happens and Perisic plays left, Doherty right. But yeah, it is. This is a big chance after a performance like that from Emerson, I think, for Doherty to really push his claim. Because let's be honest, Jed Spence, he's kind of waiting patiently now. I think if Spurs win the game against Sporting, the Marseille game, yes, could still be for who gets top spot, but it becomes less crucial. And that's maybe you see someone like Jed Spence given game time. And obviously the Nottingham Forest game, the Carabao Cup against his old team, he could get minutes in that as well. So he can be patient, and whatever he gets, just grab it. Just don't let Conte have any reason, like Brian Hill did in the first game in Germany, to say, told you so. And I think now it is it's on Doherty, I feel, to just kind of press his claim again at the weekend if he starts against Everton. And don't forget, it was against Everton. Yeah, it was last season at home when Doherty was superb. 2 assists, I think. I remember one really good one for Kane, I think. It's like a playmaker's ball. It was really good. So, yeah. It's his big chance there. I just felt the other embarrassing moment in a way was just how Højbjerg delivered the perfect cross that a wing-back or winger should be putting in. Yeah. I mean, look, I do think he works better with Kulusevski Emerson because he does kind of just say, do your stuff, lad. But I also feel that Matt Doherty was developing a really good partnership with Kulusevski as well. So, yeah, I think it's all on all on Doherty right now to claim back that shirt that was his towards the end of the season as well. And I do feel like Spurs fans are getting so frustrated now with the Emerson situation that it's going to be, if he doesn't turning it around and really start to impress. And look, I do feel he's improved since last season. I must stress that. I do feel he does, and he has. And obviously he's spent a lot of money, as Tom Barkley from The Sun revealed, £800,000 or so on recovery equipment and kind of just developing himself, scouting people like Hakimi to try and kind of understand what Conte wants from his wing-backs. But it just hasn't done enough to produce that kind of extra bit. But I just wonder now whether the fans are going to start getting on his back too much. And if that starts to... At the moment, I think it's mainly social media. But if that starts to translate to the stadium and you start to get boos in the stadium and things like that, then it becomes really unpleasant. It's not fair on him. It does him no favours whatsoever, of course, as well, because he kind of became a little bit of a cult figure probably at the start of the season. And there was only a row or two in front of the press box. There was someone wearing an Emerson Royale shirt in front of us as well. So, he has got his he's become a little bit of a cult hero in that respect. But I think the key now is it doesn't become a fans against Conte thing, because Conte could end up digging his heels in. But, the fans are going to get frustrated. Of course they are. If attacks aren't progressing down that right-hand side because he's not quite right for that, and I'd say even more so if he's making defensive errors. That's probably the problem as well, is he can maybe get away with not being as great going forward if he is making up for it with defensive work. But if he doesn't... I told myself I wasn't even going to speak too much about Emerson Royale, and I feel I've kind of gone on too long there. So I'm going to move away from Emerson Royale. Hopefully, he comes in. He's out for the next 2 games now, isn't he? Because they're Premier League games. And hopefully, when he does next come in, he'll have a fantastic performance. But yeah, that was actually the other thing I felt that I wanted to say was when Conte was telling me about feeling that he'd made a mistake at the end of the game and stuff like that, it kind of stirred some echoes of memory kind of thing from Jose Mourinho back after the Royal Antwerp game. And if you remember, back in that game, he'd changed up the team a lot. It was a Europa League game at Antwerp. He changed up the team a lot, and he was so unhappy with how they played in that first half. He made 4 changes at the break. So obviously Conte made all 5 changes towards the end of this game. But it just, it reminded me of it. And the reason I say that, well, here's the Mourinho quotes. I looked them up from the time. He said, I would have liked to have made 11 substitutions. I didn't make 5 because I was afraid of a long 45 minutes without any changes to make. There's only one person to blame, which is me. I picked the team. I chose the players to start. And at half-time, I tried to improve the situation, but it was not enough. Look, you know what our best team is. You know the same thing that I know, that everybody knows. But I always like to think that players deserve an opportunity, as in the other players. We have a big squad with lots of good players. It's my responsibility to give them opportunity to play and also their opportunity to catch the chance with both hands and be in conditions to ask for more. And tonight, my future choices are going to be very easy. But again, there's only one person responsible, not the player. It's my responsibility because it's my decision to play. And from that point on, Mourinho was really wary about rotating. He just didn't trust the players that had come in at all. And I just kind of, as soon as Conte was saying it, it's just like, it reminded me of that moment. That a big squad, but those coming in aren't doing those little bits and pieces that the manager wants them to do, and is then not winning their trust, and that means they end up overplaying a very set 11, maybe 12, 13 players. Yeah, that did worry me a little bit, and especially there's a language, the same, like, it's my fault, I made a mistake. while secret. And that's why I wonder whether he couldn't actually answer my question when I said, what would you do differently? Because I think the answer was not bring on those players. And it's where it's really difficult because he's got this squad. He needs to keep them confident because there could be an injury and they have to come in at any point. But also, if he's going to do that and the game shifts in that much of a fashion to being nervous against 10 players, I can understand why you'd be reluctant then to bring on certain players in the next game. So yeah, just kind of reminded me. But the problem is Conte needs to trust that squad because of the games that are coming up. They're still coming thick and fast. Like I say, every 3 to 4 days there is a game at the moment. And, you know, he can't doubt whether he can bring on subs at the end of games to give them that little bit of rest, some of these players. He can't doubt that he can change up his team. Like I say, you're looking at left wing back, left of central defence, and Richarlison or Kulusevski. So that's 3 positions where I feel like he's really comfortable in changing up and not being that worried about dropping quality. I mean, right wing backs is a bit of a different one. There's kind of different scenarios there. I still don't think he's actually deciding who the best player is for the role because of Doherty's drop off in form after his injury. But he's got to. My worry is in the midfield because I was looking up the numbers. Spurs are becoming really reliant on Højbjerg and Bentancur, like really reliant. And, you know, that late on, just in those final minutes, having Basuma and Skip together, they looked completely understandably like 2 players that have barely played together. That's exactly what they are. But it's a vicious circle, isn't it? Because he's so reliant on Bentancur and Højbjerg and trusts them so much, and they're super fit, those 2, Basuma and Skip, are not getting the minutes to kind of get into the swing of the team. It just works so many different ways. So I looked at the minutes that they've been playing as well. So only Lloris, Kane and Dyer have played more minutes than Højbjerg and Bentancur for Spurs. Lloris has done 1,170 minutes. I mean, you could argue that Fraser Forster would deserve a little go at some point just to mentally rest Lloris, if not physically. Kane and Dyer both had 1,158 minutes so far. But Højbjerg is 1,150, so just 8 minutes behind, and Bentancur 1,037. Højbjerg is just a machine when you look at his numbers. He started every single game this season. I think he came off obviously the other night. I think he might have come off about 10-15 minutes ago in one of the other games, possibly. Look at last season. He only missed 1 game that he was available for last season in the Premier League. 1 game. Every single other one he started. Other than, he was ill for one, so he couldn't play in one. But what I find kind of weird about it is the fact that Basuma has been one of the best players and best midfielders in the Premier League in recent years. So you're not talking about some kind of newcomer from another country that is kind of fitting into the Premier League or someone that doesn't know how to play incredibly well in the Premier League. Yes, he's kind of trying to cope with Conte's demands, but you know it sounds like he's starting to get the hang of that. I just feel like now is the time, and against Everton, I would personally go for a midfield 3 because we don't know whether Kulusevski is going to be fit enough. Richarlison, if that knee thing is an issue, Lucas doesn't seem to be ready yet for a start, so I would go for the 3 in that respect. Just start getting Basuma at game time, get him back to where he was. He was a match winner, whether it was in an attacking or a defensive sense for Brighton. Mainly obviously a defensive sense, but that box-to-box ability he's got as well. Or he can play behind the midfield 2 as well if he's in a 3. And Skippy needs minutes as well. Conte thinks he's going to be an absolute star for the future. So it's where, if there's ever a time to give these players a minutes, it's now. Because the games are coming so thick and fast. Because if you don't, Højbjerg and Bentancur, as fit as they are going to tire. And even worse, they're going to pick up an injury at some point. And you've also got the added thing, and this is totally subconsciously, that the World Cup is coming up. There's going to be moments when those 2 players who are both playing at the World Cup are going to think, oh, we're only a couple of weeks now. They're both incredible competitors, but I'm just talking about subconsciously, without even really thinking about it, of going in for a big 50-50 and thinking, I don't want to be out of the World Cup. Just their brain tells them that, and then maybe they don't go in, whereas you don't have that issue with Skippy and Basuma. So that's another thing to also think about as well. So yeah, some very different games coming up. You know, Everton and Manchester United in themselves present a very different challenge. Newcastle as well, at home. Sporting as well, obviously, and then Bournemouth away, all before the month is done. You know, Conte was saying about the actual aspect of getting through if they can. He says in the Champions League, for us that would be a great achievement to reach the knockout rounds. That was our first target at the start of the season, to go through to the next round. Now our focus has to be on Saturday, because I tried to exploit the situation. I tried to give it a bit of rest to the players. We have tomorrow to rest, and then on Friday we have to prepare the game against Everton. It's an important game for us. I think Everton didn't start the season well, but now they have a good balance. They're a strong team. Frank Lampard is a really good manager, and they are doing a really good job. For sure, we have to be at our best for the game on Saturday. So yeah, speaking to Guesty, if you're not aware who Guesty is, it's Rob Guest, who I do the podcast Golden Guest Talk Tottenham with. We're colleagues, we work together writing about Spurs. He's also an Everton fan, so he's been kind of filling me in on what they've been like recently. Defensively, much improved. Obviously, they made big additions in the summer, which has really helped them. And up front is where they've been struggling. Obviously, missing Richarlison. I think Calvert-Lewin's been injured, although he did come back, I think, in their last game off the bench. So it'd be interesting to see fitness-wise where he's at, whether he's ready to start. If he's not, Morpay will start, who has caused Spurs some issues in the past as well. So Everton are a different beast, I think, to the one that Spurs trounced 5-0 last time. But we'll see. Guesty did say before that game in the press area as we were walking up, I think Everton could do really well tonight. And then they lost 5-0, and I haven't let him forget it since. But yeah, he won't say that this time, I'd imagine. Yeah, but it won't be as cut and dried, I don't think, as the last game. And especially as Everton will have had a full, fresh week without any matches, whereas Spurs, it depends on those changes. Because for Conte now, it's about building up some momentum in all the players, not just those kind of chosen 11 to 13 players. Just because I do think, especially with the way Liverpool have been playing in the Premier League, there's a chance at the moment, what are they, 10 points ahead? Liverpool, I think it's 10 points, of just kind of trying to create that gap, keep that gap, go into the World Cup, really solidified in the top 10, top 4 if they can. And then you see where you're at, because obviously everything can happen at World Cup. Who knows who gets injured or what happens? And then also you've got that January transfer window, which I do think is going to be the biggest January transfer window that a lot of clubs have had in the winter for a long time as they react to what's happened in the World Cup, but also where they're at in the season. Because let's say Spurs, I don't know, sitting second or third, whatever. If they're in that position going into January transfer window, you can bet your bottom dollar that Conte and Paratici will be saying to Daniel Levy, now is when you invest. Now is when you strengthen, and we make sure you get not only top 4 next season, Champions League football next season, but we really push on. Because obviously the further you go in the Champions League, the more, if you're going to think about it from a money perspective, you bring in more money, but also just being able to go for it at the top of that table. Because yes, City are an absolute machine, but they're not top. And they have had matches where they've had kind of results that you don't expect. So Spurs have just got to be there. And I keep saying it, haven't reached that top form yet and that top gear. So they will, but with the foundation of points won when they weren't in top gear. Look, we'll all remember back to the Nelson and Zaha January window when Harry Redknapp didn't get what he wanted. And that will hopefully, if we're talking about lessons learned, as Conte was, that's one that needs to be learned. If there's an opportunity out there for Spurs to improve in a certain position going into that, or two, going into that final run, or the second half, I guess it is. Oh, it's so rubbish that the season's split in two. It really is rubbish. But if there's an opportunity to improve there, do it. They've got to do it. Again, speculating to accumulate. I haven't actually looked to see whether they've drawn down the remaining 50 of that 150 million. I think it had to happen, I think it was by the end of the year. So whether that has been drawn down, I have to look. It's actually quite easy to find out. I will do that. It just hadn't crossed my mind until now. So that you'd think there will be money to do that. But look, hey, I'm not saying anything about transfer money and what's available, because people get very upset if they count it up and decide it's different to what they thought it was going to be. Although they did spend 130 million in summer, not including Romero stuff. Say 30 million. They committed to 130 million. That's the best way to put it. But hey, I'm not going to convince angry people otherwise. So yeah, we shall see what happens with that. I was going to talk very briefly about that under-19s game as well, and the Google naming rights stuff. So under-19s game, really good first half. Alfie, I wrote a little piece actually on 3 of the attackers because Alfie Devine and Jamie Donnelly were fantastic in the first half. Alfie Devine looked like a player that was playing in the wrong level for him. He and Jamie Donnelly, known as a striker really, but has been playing in midfield. He was playing in a 4-3-3. They were both either side of Matthew Craig in the middle, who got sent off for what was deemed a stamp near the end of the game. But Donnelly's kind of moved back into this midfield role this season, mainly because they've struggled for players in the midfield because they've had like Jamie Bowden's had a bad injury, a couple of others they haven't had available. But also just to kind of round out his game, and because he's quite creative. He's a bit like Harry Kane. He's got a very nice touch on him and a through ball, and that was exactly what happened. He played 2 through balls to Alfie Devine. The first one, Devine rounded the keeper and scored. The second one, very nice clinical finish into the bottom left corner. So Spurs were in complete control. 2-0, very comfortable at the break. Came out for the second half and collapsed for 8 minutes. Conceded 3 goals. Really bad goals as well. Fair play to Frankfurt. I think they made 3 changes at the break and they looked a much better team. But you don't do that. You don't collapse in 8 minutes. And then from that point on, it became quite difficult to really find a way back. I think Romain Mundle, who was okay. I think he's been better. I keep getting told he's been really good this season. I haven't seen too much of... I saw him in one of the under-21 games a couple of weeks back. But yeah, no, I keep getting told he's had a really good season. He was okay. Like I say, he hit the post with... It's like a kind of a cross-come shot thing. I didn't know really which of the two it was. But yeah, they just couldn't find a way back into it. So, yeah. It didn't go very well for them, and then they had that red card for Craig right towards the end. But yeah, definitely Alfie Devine and Jamie Donnelly. You can see the talent there. Alfie Devine, as long as he stays fit now, because he could have gone out on loan in the summer, but unfortunately got a hamstring injury right near the end of the window. If he's all fit and healthy, I think January he heads off somewhere, and there'll be a queue of suitors for him. Get him like Dane Scarlett, play League 1, League 2 football. Getting those minutes, get him developed, and he'll be a hell of a player. Obviously only signed 5-year deal last month, wasn't it? 2027. And then you had Will Lancashire, who came off the bench towards the end. So Will Lancashire, if you'd forgotten, was a Spurs signing in the summer. Their kind of talent recruitment scouts, kind of looking at youngsters in the game, recommended Lancashire, and there was reports it was about 2 million. I don't know whether it would have been, or maybe it's all potential 2 million in the future. But Lancashire was signed from Sheffield United. Hadn't even played for the first team yet or anything like that. Just was incredibly highly rated. But unfortunately, he came to Spurs with a little bit of an injury. And they've got him no pre-season either because of it, I think. But they've got him fit. And he came on the other day against Wolves in the Premier League Cup, Under-18 Premier League Cup. Came off the bench, scored 2 goals and was superb and absolutely rescued the point. It was a 3-3, that one. I only got to see him for a few minutes towards the end of this game. He kind of came on, I say a few minutes, maybe about half an hour, 25 minutes or so against Frankfurt in this under-19s game. He's a big lad, physical presence. He just needs to get sharper, really. That's all it is for him. But I think you'll see... We'll be talking about Will Lancashire as this season goes on. You'll be hearing about this 17-year-old who's scoring a lot of goals, I think, for the under-18s. I think you'll see it. Him and Donnelly. I'm quite excited to see how they work as a pairing. Donnelly may stay in midfield. He's also 17. He scored something like 16 in 18 games last season, something like that. A terrific record for the under-18s. But for him, he's been stepping up to that development squad, the under-21s with Wayne Burnett. Wayne Burnett has such a tough job. Tough job relatively in the football world, but because as an under-21s coach, you're putting out a team that can change any time because your best players may be plucked and go on loan, and even during the season, some of your best players can be called on a match day to go into first team training to help out with their numbers, and you lose them, or at best case, they may be a bit knackered because they've been in a Conte training session. and he's had a lot of that recently. So you can see that the results have been a little bit kind of up and down because of what squad he might have available on the day. It can, it really can. It can change with each passing day, let alone match. So yeah, I always do feel a little bit of sympathy for that. And sometimes I think people look at results in academy football with like, oh, they should be marching, so they should be winning everything. It's just not. It's not what academy football's about. It's about developing players first and foremost, more than anything. So yeah, keep an eye on Will Lancashire. I'd be interested to see whether they start using him in the development squad as well, or whether he sticks in the under-18s to begin with. But yeah, keep an eye. Remember that name, Will Lancashire, if you weren't aware that he signed in the summer. And on the Google Talks, look, it's it's another name. It's another one of the companies that Spurs have spoken to over the years since the stadium opened. Still told the same. Nothing close at the moment. As you were was kind of the expression I was told from a few people within the club. Yeah. Who knows? You remember the Google, that thing always gets passed around. Someone did a Google mock-up stadium, didn't they, for something about 2-3 years ago, maybe more. And it just does the rounds all the time. So like this week it's come out, and I think some people that didn't see it back then were like, oh, there it is, that's what it will look like. And it's like, no, it gets wheeled out. It's like the old, was it the Kraft family? Was it the Patriots owners? Someone made it for a April Fool's thing, and every year it would circulate on social media again as if it was a real thing. They were about to bid for Spurs. But yeah, that's not to say that we may not have one day the Google Arena, the Google Dome, or just the Google, whatever they call it. You know, I think if Spurs could get an absolute huge company on board, it would only add to the glitz and glamour of the whole thing. And of course, the finances have to be right. That's the point of it. You know, Todd Klein has made a big point, who's the guy that's like leading up the whole thing, the chief commercial officer, that the pandemic stopped them really showing it off, whereas now we're at a period where it is full steam ahead, and they've got these 2 NFL games that were both 61,000 crowd kind of thing, shown across the world. The double doink as well in the first game. You know, you've got Saquon Barkley wearing a Spurs shirt on the Tottenham Hotspur pitch and all this sort of stuff, and for the Giants. And you've had Lady Gaga playing there, you've had Anthony Joshua playing there, playing the boxing there as well, in the heavyweight championship fight. You've had Guns N' Roses there as well. So it's been shown off to its full thing. I did, after the NFL game, was it the first or second one, I still have people going, you know, oh, it's rubbish, get that off of my pitch kind of thing. And it's a bit like, do you remember at White Hart Lane, they used to have NFL, they used to have London Monarchs play there in the European League. They used to have boxing, took place there as well. They'd have concerts as well. There's a bit like, it's always been the way. And I never understand the argument of just leaving it empty on a match day. On non-match days. Use it, get the money in. Look, I know people will always have their doubts of where the money goes to. That's what I always said. But I can only go on what I'm told constantly by lots of people. And I'd imagine it's there in the accounts to see as well. But I'm told it goes back into the football club constantly. But hey, I can only say that so many times. But yeah, the Google thing would be interesting as well, because like, don't Spurs have a lot of stuff in the stadium? It's either Samsung or Hewlett Packard or both involved in the stadium. So how does that work? If it were to become the Google Arena, the Google Dome, would that not be conflicting with their rivals powering stuff within it? I don't know how that works. Maybe they would have to end those partnerships. I don't know. I'm massively speculating with no knowledge on how that would even work in a business sense. But yeah, I found that interesting. So yes, another company they've spoken to, but at the moment, nothing close. Who knows? Who knows what can suddenly happen in the world of football and business? It's been a while, you know. We've got used to calling it the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium now, or some of you will still call it White Hart Lane. But eventually, they can get a big deal that pumps a lot of money, because, you know, you look at those deals and they're 250, 300 million plus. Some have been upwards of some in America with 500, 600 million. Huge money. I think that was dollars. So yeah. I'd be intrigued to see if it isn't an American one, especially with the NFL side to it. And Daniel Levy's very kind of big on his American stuff. He spends a lot of time out there, or he has in the past. So it'd be interesting. But then also you've got the links with the likes of AIA and the whole career angle, of course, as well, with Sonny. You'd think there'd be a lot of interest. And it definitely sounds like there's been lots of talks with lots of different companies. But it's just finding the deal that I guess suits Spurs the best out of it all. Hopefully it'll come at some point. But there you go. Right, I'm going to head off now. Like I say, press conference tomorrow with Antonio Conte. And then, just a very quick shout out. It doesn't need a shout out, but to Harry Kane. Off the pitch stuff. I watched his little animation he did about like mental health awareness and stuff like that. It was his story essentially from being a boy and being rejected at Arsenal, all that. I thought it was the loveliest bit of animation ever, with such a great message about, look, rejection comes at you in life. That's how it happens. Just work hard. Don't doubt yourself. Keep on going. It was such a lovely message. And I'd love to see that in schools as well. I would love to see that little video. It was only about minute and a half, 2 minutes, whatever it was, just showing there's so many little kids I think that would benefit from that. I thought it was such a brilliant initiative. So yeah, just want to say fair play to him. Non-pitch, non-football matters there. So Antonio Conte tomorrow, press conference. Obviously you'll see the 10:30 stuff come out, the embargo stuff later in the evening, which you get with Premier League ones. And then the match on Saturday. That was at 5:30 kickoff as well against Everton. So yeah, I will try to do another video hopefully on Sunday to kind of delve into all of that before we then have the trip to Old Trafford and all of that as well in the week. Plenty to come. Keeping me busy, which is why you're getting two videos a week at the moment, because there's so much to talk about with each passing game and press conference and everything. So there, yes, definitely heading off this time. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.